Good morning and welcome to this latest morning scoop from the Arizona Capital Times, Coalition for Protecting Arizona's Lifeline. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. I'm your host, Steve Goldstein, joining us a great panel of guests. Neil Giuliano, President and CEO of Greater Phoenix Leadership, Kelly Osborne, Senior Technologist at Intel with a focus on water, and joining us a little later, Todd Sanders, President and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber. Throughout the course of this hour, we'll be asking for your questions and we'll try to give as many good answers as we can. I'll try to sprinkle those in as fits the conversation. So please send them in throughout the course of the hour. Just go up to the Q&A and throw in your question there. And now, with an intro for this discussion, I want to welcome Terry Goddard, who is president of the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board. Terry, good morning. Take it away.
Thank you, Steve, and welcome to this morning scoop on water in Arizona. Always a hot topic, I think it's safe to say, but today, the temperature around water issues has reached the boiling point. It's truly critical, and I'm so glad that you're here to listen to business leaders talk about what water means to Arizona, and more particularly, speaking for the Central Arizona Project, what the lifeline that is represented by this amazing canal means to the future of Arizona. I think it's a critical message, and thank you again for joining in. This all came into focus for me. I've been talking for years about the fact that we've had a critical water issue in Arizona, especially dealing with the Colorado River and the shortage on the Colorado, which essentially has been emerging since the year 2000. That was the beginning of what the drought that we are currently involved in. It's been running for 26 years. It has been an epic shortage. Climate change has clearly contributed to the lack of water in the upper Colorado slopes. And that is where the Central Arizona Project gets all of its water, from the Colorado River. So that's been on my mind for a long time, but I know it hasn't gotten to everybody in Arizona. There's a lot else going on. And a business leader recently grabbed me and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm working on water." And he said, "Well, when does it become critical? When does this issue on the Colorado River become critical?" And I wanted to say, well, about 5 years ago. I suppressed that because that would have seemed unduly dismissive. And I said, well, clearly today it is critical. And we are facing a new arrangement, a new agreement on the Colorado River, which is to be renewed every 20 years. And the deadline is October of this year. So if it was ever critical, it's critical right now. And hopefully you all and others across our state get that message. There have been years of meetings among the 7 basin states. They've been sitting across the table with each other for well over 2 years, trying to get a solution that will be amenable to all the states and will recognize that we have less water in the river. And nothing has happened. Basically, the upper basin, we're the lower basin in Arizona, along with California and Nevada. The upper basin is Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Wyoming. And they've taken the position that they don't have to give any more because they haven't gotten enough before. And even in times of urgency, such as we have this year, they don't have to cut back any of their uses. It all has to come from the lower basin, specifically from Arizona. And so we've gotten nowhere. And then in January, the federal government, through the Bureau of Reclamation, issued a draft environmental impact statement. And that was another dose of bad news, because all 5 of the options that the federal government put on the table were bad for Arizona. All 5 of them. Not one required the upper basin to do a thing to contribute in times of extreme shortage. One option, the one that they say they're most likely to take if in fact there is no agreement among the states, would reduce the Central Arizona Project, Arizona's lifeline, to 15% of its normal productive capacity, to what we've been importing to Arizona since 1985, 15%. So that would be a serious cut to all of us in the state of Arizona, in the Central Arizona area. So that was bad news. And added to that, the hydrology, as I mentioned, this year has been terrible. It's one of the worst years in historic record. And so very little water has been getting from the Rocky Mountains down to Lake Powell. And as a result, we're facing a double whammy, a pending decision among the states or by the federal government as to what Arizona's and Central Arizona in particular is going to get from this. And the rainfall has been terrible. So this is a time to go back to my conversation with a business leader. This is a critical time for our state. So I encourage you to get the facts, and hopefully this session is a good start. Get engaged. It's not a time to panic. I want to emphasize that, and I'm sure the folks on this panel will emphasize it. There are ways that we can work with a serious problem, because Arizona cities have taken a very long view and they've planned for just about everything, but it's still a serious problem. And join Protecting Arizona's Lifeline. There's a website, protectingarizonaslifeline.com, as you might have figured. And that has a lot of material, a lot of information about what you can do as a citizen, as a business leader to help us out. There's so much to be proud of in our state. And I know this panel will talk a little about what businesses have done, recognizing that we live in a desert and that we have to conserve, we have to reuse, we have to be very frugal with our water. It's incredibly precious. As the Native Americans say, water is life. And that's certainly true for the state of Arizona and all of us. So we've pulled together in the last several years. Arizonans collectively have saved over 5 million acre feet of water that has been kept in Lake Mead that we did not use. And we're prepared to do more. But we need agreement among the other states. And that's what we don't have right now. So thanks to the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce, when Todd gets here, the Greater Phoenix leadership with Neil, and with the Intel Corporation, which has been an industry leader in water conservation. So on behalf of the Central Arizona Project Board of Directors, thank you for your participation, and I'll listen intently to what our business leadership has to say about this serious problem. Thank you, Steve.
Gary, thanks so much. Neil, let me start with you then. So let's talk about, to this point, how much have business leaders, members of Greater Phoenix leadership been doing to secure the state's water supply? What are some of the things that they've been doing that our viewers need to know about?
Sure. Well, for those on the line who may not know, GPL stands for Greater Phoenix Leadership, and it's about 120 CEOs of Arizona's Greater Phoenix region, Arizona's largest business enterprises. And so these folks who've been running these businesses for many years have been very, very early adopters of water efficiency practices in their own businesses, their own operations, of course. And they've been doing that for a very long time, not only for their bottom line, but to be a part of being good stewards of Arizona's water over decades and decades. So, but then GPL also has a water task force, a group of, I think that group's now about 10 CEOs that actively follow water policy for many years, and they help educate the broader membership whose business may not be that focused on the water situation in Arizona. And then we also get involved and we support all the different efforts that are going on with regard to statewide efforts for water needs, advocating for state funding with it was the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, supporting reform conversations, the Governor's Water Policy Council, the recent, I think last year's session, it was the ag to urban issue that was talked about and got passed. We were involved with that. That helps incentivize people voluntarily being involved with conversations about irrigated lands, lower water intensity, all of those sorts of things. So very involved. And we are one of the business groups, of course, that has joined the Coalition for Protecting Arizona's Lifeline that was mentioned, working with all of those partners with a really unified voice from the business community to work on and defend our Colorado River supplies.
Thank you, Neil, so much. Kelly, let me introduce you to the group because you represent Intel, which has been a major corporation in the Valley for a very long time. I think we've been hearing a lot about the idea that we are very appreciative of what Intel brings and the semiconductor industry brings to Arizona. But there are concerns that people have expressed about, well, are they using up too much of our water? Do they disproportionately use a lot of water? Is that a misperception? And can you explain some of that and how Intel has been working with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there is a little bit of a misperception about that, right? And in Arizona, kind of how our overall water use breaks out. somewhere between 75% of the water use is for agriculture, 25% for municipal, which is, residential, commercial, kind of the small industrial. And then, 5-6% from large industrial, including things like mining, data center, semiconductor manufacturing. However, obviously for semiconductors, water is critical. It's extremely important to our operations. We use ultra pure water within our processes. We have a lot of water use within our facilities. So any kind of further cuts to the Colorado River would be detrimental, right? Because really we've worked hard as Intel to set the standard, as Terry graciously said in his opening. We've worked to set the standard for industry by investing. We've invested nearly $1 billion in water treatment and reclamation facilities to minimize that freshwater withdrawal. So we've looked at how can we reuse and reclaim water rather than pulling fresh water from our watersheds. It's a very intentional plan that we've had, and we've actually kind of started this with our very first factory that we built on the Ocotillo site that came up to production around 1996. It's been over the decades that we have continued to build these kind of facilities and have these water stewardship plans. If we had to take additional severe reductions from the Colorado River, Terry said one of the options that could likely be put forward is getting only 15% of what we had been receiving. That could have a dramatic impact on the growing semiconductor ecosystem that we have in Arizona. We really do appreciate the work that the governor has been doing as part of these negotiations, right? She's highlighting the importance not only of the semiconductor industry, but also other industries within the state that support critical supply chains, national defense. It's really an important conversation that we have. But we as Intel have been working very hard on water conservation since 2020. We've actually increased our annual water conserved by about 75%. We've decreased our annual freshwater withdrawal by about 30%, all while we've brought 2 additional factories online, right? I mean, that kind of shows the innovation and importance that we've really proactively and voluntarily shown, the respect that we have for the water in our communities. And then not only do we reduce and reuse water, but we also restore water more than we consume. Intel has a net positive goal for water. So water that we actually lose to evaporation, we work with nonprofits within our watersheds to go then restore water to the river. So an example of that was working with Trout Unlimited to convert some of our, or an organic cattle ranch that was operating on about 125,000 acres from a high water intense crop of alfalfa to kind of cool season, low water use grasses, and improving their irrigation efficiency. That project then helps leave water in the Colorado River that had been previously withdrawn. So those kind of projects and investments that we've made has left Intel in Arizona net positive for water. So we're restoring more water than we consume.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. I think Neil, you and Terry obviously have been in the Valley for decades, as I have. And so I'm not sure if I should direct this to Kelly or the two of you, but I think it's interesting that is part of it the fact that Intel has been in the Valley for decades, that Intel sort of got it early on that, hey, this is a desert and we need to plan, we need to be innovative in these sorts of things. And I guess I wonder, Neil, as someone who works as a business leader, maybe I could throw this to you. Is that something that for folks who've been in the Valley a long time, it's a no-brainer? And for other ones, not that you have to twist in your arms, I don't mean that, but is it more of a, hey, you need to learn what's been going on here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm on 52 years of being in Arizona, and look, we know, for example, look, we're going to continue to grow, right? But growth at any cost is not the Arizona way. It can't be the Arizona way. And so we have to be, I call it curated growth. We have to be thoughtful, intentional, and very specific about what we want and how we want to make it happen. Because look, it is one of our most important issues. If we want to continue to maintain quality of life, improve the economy, be sustainable in the long term, we have to grow really, really smart. But smart growth to me just sounds like too much of a buzzword. So I like saying curated growth. But everything we do as a state, our ability to attract people, the new businesses, tourism and hospitality is our third largest economic sector for the state of Arizona. That's really important. We have an agricultural heritage, of course, that's really, really important. So all of these things really rely on us making the very best smart decisions that we can for our water supply. We constantly have the opportunity to talk to people who are to come to Arizona or want to grow even larger within Arizona. And of course, water is always one of the big topics. So is education, so is transportation. All of these things come together. So for me, it's about being focused and curating our growth so that it will blend with and be a part of maintaining our ecosystem here. Look, we're desert dwellers. We have been used to this for a very long time. And I think that's why we're very good at it because we have to be.
But yeah, Terry, go ahead, please. Yeah, I was gonna
Oh,
let me
no,
piggyback on that one. Yeah, go
you
ahead.
go ahead. I've got a little bit of a statement about the amount of supplies. So go on with Neil's point.
Yes, and so please jump in on both of those. But it goes back to maybe what you said in your introductory remarks related to a certain business leader who, when is it? I can't remember the exact word used. When is it a crisis or when it is? And so, do you feel like there is a learning curve even for those who are quite aware that it's a desert, that we need practice and planning and innovation, that there is a feeling that no, it's not just those lay folks like myself. It is people who are involved in business on a day-to-day basis who need to realize the challenge. Maybe they don't realize how quite great the challenge is.
I think that's true, and part of it, and Neil could talk to this, I think, eloquently, better than I. But part of it is an understandable concern by business leaders that they don't want to panic the investment community. They don't want to say Arizona's running out of water, even if it's getting very, very, very close. And the reason for that is the New York Times and other media outlets are way, way quick to jump on any deficiency that they see in Arizona. For example, 2 years ago, the governor, Department of Water Resources, announced that there was a 5% shortage in the extreme West Valley in the amount of groundwater that was available for development. And they cut off some new permits. That's exactly what they should have done. But the New York Times headline was that Arizona is running out of water. They didn't say it was a 5% reduction over 100 years that was being targeted, and that we've got the most responsible long-range groundwater program in the nation. I wanted to go and assault the editorial board and say, where's New York's 100-year plan? I don't see it because they don't have one. No other state has what Arizona has in terms of carefully curating, in Neil's term, our water resources. Let me quickly say, I may have failed in my introduction to say just how serious this problem is, because Haley said it was a 15% reduction, and I probably said that, but it's not a 15% reduction in CAP. The preferred alternative that the feds put out would reduce the CAP to 15% of capacity. So we go from 1.5 million acre feet which we have been delivering through the Central Arizona Project since 1985 until 2022, when we had the first cutback. That first cutback was 1/3 of our total capacity. Over 512,000 acre feet were taken right off the board, and we've been living with that lower number ever since. And it meant that farming in Pinal County basically went away. So I think people forget Arizona's already given a tremendous amount in the name of conservation, and it's been painful. And what we have now, the feds say their preferred alternative, the one they're most likely to impose if the states can't reach an agreement, would take Arizona to 232,000 acre feet in the CAP. That is 15% of what we've been delivering in the past. So I apologize if I got that number incorrect. And I just want to make sure everybody understands that we've already taken a 1/3 reduction. We're potentially going to a much lower number if the feds impose what they say they will, without real pressure from all of us to Congress and to the Department of the Interior, because that's where the decision is going to be made. And We just haven't gotten our word across, I don't think.
Okay. Neil, let me have you jump on that just briefly then. So is that the perception?
Well, I think the messaging matters, of course, in anything, but managing the messaging is, I think, perhaps what we can focus on a little bit more. Most Arizonans turn on their faucets or turn on whatever they're turning on. I'm not sure they really know where that really water is really coming from or what it means in the grand picture of things in our region. Do they know the difference between parts of Arizona that rely on groundwater and parts of Arizona that use groundwater perhaps as a backup? I don't think most people know that, but it's our responsibility to manage that messaging and do a better job of managing the messaging, and quite honestly, we really can't just rely on government to do that. The private sector needs to be involved in that, as we are through, our organization, the leaders in GPL oversee about 325,000 employees. I can assure you in their employee newsletters and their ways of communicating are very specific and very concrete about all of these things, but that's not everybody that's in the region, right? So the messaging matters and we have to manage it better.
And Steve, it gets even
Mhm.
more complicated. If I could interpose
Yes,
one
please, sir.
thought,
Yeah.
it depends. For instance, Neil's city of Tempe takes about 10% of its total water supply from the Central Arizona Project. Other cities, it's a little bigger number. Down the road a bit in Tucson, it's 100% of their water comes from the CAP. So it depends on where you live, and they've managed it very well, and they have some reserves that they can use in Tucson. But so you need to not just look at the sky is falling mantra that we're talking about, because it is serious, but the serious impacts depend upon where you live. And it can be dramatically different from one city to the next. So you need the facts, you need to dig in, you need to also know, and I think this is critically important, that cities and towns in Arizona have gotten the message long ago, and they have diversified their portfolios. They've not tried to depend entirely on CAP water, although that's been a blessed sanctuary for all of them. And that's again something that depends on knowledge, and we need to have as much of it as we possibly can.
Well, Kelly, since this is to some extent a business focused panel, I want to have you talk a little bit about public private partnerships and how Intel has been involved in that. What are some things that have really stood out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think public-private partnerships are becoming really critical in water conservation. The more companies and municipalities that they work in can work together to treat and reclaim the water for beneficial use across the communities is important. Intel, we've actually been partnering with the city of Chandler on the Ocotillo brine reduction facility. Again, since our first factory at our Ocotillo campus started up in 1996, that facility is a 3 million gallon a day facility that can reclaim 96% of the rejected water from our ultra pure water treatment process, that's then sent back to Intel for reuse. The facility is owned and operated by the city of Chandler, and it's financed by Intel, but it's been beneficial to both parties, right? And the community that we operate in, we try to be a really good neighbor. And the city of Chandler has been an amazing partner with us, not only in this facility, but in how they have really expanded and planned the city for expansion in a responsible way. They've got an amazing reclaim system. All the wastewater that goes to their public treatment facilities gets treated to A+ reclaim levels for reuse in irrigation, cooling, or recharging the aquifer. So, working with the city and partnering with them, being very transparent in how we're using water, how we're reclaiming water, what our water demands over time look like, is really important. So I think having those partnerships is really critical, and I think that's the Ocotillo brine reduction facility is a great example of that.
Well, is there a best practices situation there, Kelly, where it feels like Intel was able to build these good relationships with Chandler? Do you get, even in your position, you get calls from folks saying, we would really like to figure out a way to do some of the things that Intel has done, whether what you're talking about with your own facilities, but also dealing with the host cities and the home cities of where a company's based.
Absolutely. I mean, the city of Chandler has had several different cities within the valley, across the nation, even globally, where semiconductor companies are coming into the communities. Those municipalities have come to Chandler, and we've actually walked them through our facilities and how we do water reclamation here. They've kind of worked with the city on how to build those relationships with the semiconductors coming into their backyards. We've kind of grown up with the city of Chandler, and so people are keying in on that, and what makes it work so well. I mean, there are several people. We've got not only government affairs, public affairs people that are working at a government level. I meet with the city on a weekly basis from an operations perspective to ensure, they're not seeing any issues, we're not seeing any issues, how we're, reusing things. Having that kind of level of trust and transparency is really important to build that kind of relationship. And it certainly takes some growing pains, and takes some time to build that level of trust. But I think the more you can share information, I think once we kind of step back and realized that the more we share information with one another, the more we both benefit and can make the best decisions for the community is what's really important.
Neil, you've been on both sides of it, in the public and the private. So what do you make of what Kelly had to say? And what do you think going forward, the importance of public-private partnerships is?
Oh, Kelly makes a great point. Look, there's one thing I know about this and most other things, and that is there is no one way. There is no one thing. That's the one thing we know. So these kinds of the relationship between Intel and Chandler is a great model. And it's born out of necessity, right? They have to do this. And so we have to maybe get that mindset of necessity broader and before it actually is the necessity. So it just becomes the way that you operate. And we're seeing that more and more. My observation is we're seeing that more and more. Our role, we don't operate in the public space really very much. Most of the things that we do are sort of behind the scenes, convening people, pulling the CEOs together with some public officials to talk about things and share and receive information that builds trust. That's what really builds trust. You share that information at a level that's trustworthy, and then you form a partnership that can really work. And that may seem kind of corny, but that is what happens, even for big, huge institutions like a city of 400,000 people like Chandler and Intel, which is a global presence and a global company, right? So that's the way it operates. And I think the more that we can encourage that from the very, very beginning, I think the better we're going to be. Change that mindset, change that level of necessity. We don't need it yet. No, we need it now. And we should start that way. That should be the frame from the very beginning.
Terry, jump in on that, would you please?
Sure. I mean, it's not just, I like Neil's analogy because I think we're in a time when there is no single answer. Arizona's been fortunate in the past. Our first big water step forward was the Salt River Project, which was approved, and Roosevelt Dam was built in 1912. That was the beginning of the blooming of the desert. That was when this community in central Arizona actually became viable. And the ranchers literally mortgaged their farms and their ranches to pay for that dam. That was a huge step forward for this valley and for central Arizona. The second thing was in 1968 when Congress approved the Central Arizona Project, and that truly was our lifeline. When I was mayor of Phoenix, we got the first deliveries in 1985, and the line then was our lifeline is online. But it's been online since 1985, and I think people kind of took it for granted. And so now that we're faced with some serious reductions, it's very hard to get your head around it. And everybody says, well, what's the next big deal? And I think desalt has been the answer to many people, including some former governors who've said, well, yeah, we're just going to spend $5 billion and we'll take care of the problem. Well, that's not true. It's not happening. And $5 billion wouldn't have covered the cost. So we need to look at every option. Certainly what Intel is doing to save water is a big part of it. What Scottsdale and Phoenix are leading in terms of water purification, critically important. But that doesn't solve the problem. We need to have some new supplies, and those need to be found, and it takes time. So Salt River is talking about raising Bartlett Dam. That could bring 100,000 new acre feet of water into the area. but it'll take 10 years to get it done. We're talking about interconnect within the CAP and Salt River Project. That's another area that could produce 20 to 30,000 acre feet a year. These are not all solutions to our problem, but they're incremental ways that we could get this fixed. But that will take 10 years as well. The big one, Kelly already mentioned, and that is 75% of our water goes to agriculture. And so if we're going to have a long-term solution in Arizona, it means we got to sit down with the farmers and we have to say, okay, some years it's going to be so tough that we need to have some of your water come to the industry and to the cities. That discussion hasn't been had yet. It will take time. It will take serious negotiation. It's already happened in California 10 years ago. They took care of that same issue and came out on the other end. So we've got a prototype. We know how it could be done, but Arizona needs to step up and do it. And all these issues take time. And unfortunately, October 2026 is right around the corner. So we need to look progressively. We need to look at all the solutions. We also need to tighten our belts and be ready for some serious reckoning coming up, because the CAP truly is the lifeline. And if it's cut to the way that people are talking about, that's going to be an immediate impact. And we need to be ready, and we need to find other alternatives.
Well, Terry, we have not talked about the sky is falling yet, but let me throw this one at you, Suzanne, who's joining us. Seriously considering selling our home before the October announcement. Do you expect a sell-off? Now, we don't have realtors on here, so not sure if that helps. But in terms of, is there, to be frank, I don't want to use optimism because we always have to use the word, but is there reason to think that there is a pragmatism that will actually lead to a solution, or is it going to be forced by the federal government? And then are we going to see more lawsuits? So I guess the question is, could the end of this year really be a daunting one for our state if people don't figure this out?
I hope I've made the point. It is a daunting one.
Yes.
It is a serious problem, but I feel I'm Paul Revere, not Chicken Little. The sky is not falling, but we need to make an accommodation for a different kind of more water short future. We can do it. Our cities are pioneers, as Kelly said, I think a minute ago. What's happened in Chandler has been a model for the nation. What's happening in Gilbert in terms of long range planning? I mean, they've already hunkered down and doubled their water rates, took a lot of heat for it, but they're looking ahead. They're trying to find, where are we going to be able to find the next water supply? And other communities are doing the same thing. So look at your city and town, wherever you live in Arizona, because you'll find a lot of inspiration there. The other part is, and Neil touched on this, every size, every business does not work in Arizona. We need desert sensitive employers, and they're there. And that's what we need to be going after. Not everybody. And our Department of Commerce sometimes doesn't get that message. So they need to get it loud and clear right now. But don't sell your house. Arizona is going through a tough spot, but we have been there. I can't say we've been there before, but it's never been quite this situation. But we have a lot to be very proud of. And we've done some great water long range planning, and our cities are getting ahead of the curve. But ultimately, that 75% of our water that goes to agriculture today is going to have to be, not all of it, but certainly some, and it will be compensated, needs to come to the cities and towns. And that's the agreement that's missing. Probably can't be done by October, but it definitely, our legislature, our governor, everybody needs to be focused on how do you make sure that the water in Arizona is getting to the hungry mouths, the thirsty mouths that need it so badly. And that planning is hopeful, but it still hasn't happened. So let's get on it.
Neil, so sitting up in your chair, would you like to comment on that?
Look, we've had these conversations, not to this extent, of course, for a really long time. One of the things that strikes me is, yes, we're talking about the resource of water. And we know that one of the possible ways of dealing with this is the resource of financial capacity. And so sooner or later, at different levels, in different parts of this very complex kind of circle that we live in, more resources are going to be needed and then allocated for helping fix these challenges that we have. That means those of us who are Arizonans who pay our monthly water bill to wherever we get our water from, we may see changes there that we don't like, right? And mentioned what went on in Gilbert, and I watched that conversation because it reminded me years ago when we would just a little bit of an increase in something, and there's going to, folks come out, oh, we can't have this kind of an increase and so forth. Well, again, go back to our messaging is going to matter. And the messaging also involves all of us in the business community and just citizens, residents in Arizona. Our level of awareness about stewardship of being desert dwellers and the commodity of water probably needs to elevate a little bit as well. We just sort of have been very, kind of happy to just be here and everything's good and we turn it on and water's there for whatever we need it for. Well, our mindset is going to shift. It's going to have to shift in the future if we want to continue growing, if we want to continue to be attracting people to come visit our state and provide us the resources we have for all the other things that we like. All of these things are interrelated. I mean, I go back, the one thing we know is that there's no one thing. This is all interconnected, and it's going to take an interconnection of those of us that are involved in this to search for the solutions that we can create, communicate about, and then live with as we solidify our water future. It's going to be challenging, of course, but look at the challenges that Arizona has already overcome to be where we are. Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the country. We're the 14th largest state in the United States of America. I don't think a lot of people realize that. I don't think they've known that we're not 26th anymore. We're the 14th largest state. We have the capacity to deal with all of these issues that got us here, and we have the capacity to deal with them moving forward.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Kelly, let me turn to you then. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about what Intel is doing, but without having you step into the political realm here, how does that ring true to you as far as what Intel has tried to do? And, because steward is a good word for it, because, and as Terry said, there are, Arizona is a business-friendly state, certainly, but there are certain challenges, especially if you're going to be in Maricopa County or Pima County, to realize you're in a desert. How does that ring with what Intel has tried to do over the years?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny as Neil was talking, I was thinking about a couple years ago, we went through the process for the Alliance for Water Stewardship certification. So this is an organization that is, Alliance for Water Stewardship. They are solely focused on, are you being a good steward of water? Are you using it responsibly? And as part of that process, we met with several stakeholders. From Central Arizona Project, ASU Kyle, Center for Water Policy, several NGOs, the city of Chandler, right, on and on, all these stakeholders. And, we had quite a bit of feedback around Intel, you do a great job with water stewardship, but you don't talk about it. We need you out there talking about it. And we've really taken that to heart. And, then we end up in conversations like this, right? in really going out and expressing, this is how you go make these kind of things happen. We talk about facilities that we've brought online. I've already kind of talked about the Ocotillo brine reduction facility that we have with the city of Chandler. In 2019, we brought online our own on-site water treatment and reclamation plant. So that's a 9 million gallon a day facility that can recover up to 98% of the industrial wastewater sent to the facility. The first portion of the plant is very similar to what you would see in a publicly owned treatment works, right? What the city would recover with a biological treatment. But we then do an additional treatment for total dissolved solids, so the salts and the minerals, to produce really high quality water that then we're able to reuse within the systems again, minimizing that freshwater withdrawal. So it is important to talk about it. It's important to take those steps. And, not every business is going to be able to spend close to $1 billion on these kind of facilities, right? But every business can do something. Every business can look at, are there waste streams that we can, recycle without some kind of treatment? Can we segregate waste differently so that we can reuse portions, or do some small kind of treatment on site? So there are many options for businesses to go do, and we've hosted several different tours of our facilities. We're out trying to talk about and encourage folks to go do this, because it really is a critical strategy for not only Arizona, but really it's becoming a more global initiative.
We are about 40 minutes into our discussion, about 20 minutes left. A good time to remind folks what you're watching. This is the Arizona Capital Times Morning Scoop, Coalition for Protecting Arizona's Lifeline. Our panelists are Neil Giuliano, President and CEO of Greater Phoenix Leadership, Kelly Osborne, Senior Technologist at Intel with a focus on water, and Terry Goddard, President of the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board. Guys, I want to take a moment here and go to a couple of the questions. Terry, you want to jump in before I go to a question?
Well, just Kelly reminds me of the adage that no good deed ever goes unpunished, which Intel having to spread the word is proof of that. And just to say that I think many folks are not aware that the city of Scottsdale, the city of Phoenix, through its partnerships with other cities in the valley, and the city of Tucson, have set incredibly high standards for reuse, water reuse. And to get a back on my pulpit vis-a-vis the Upper Basin, none of their communities do that. We recycle significant amounts of the water that we have, and we make sure it's used again and again. And the communities in the Upper Basin do not. So, it's a little bit of bragging rights, and it's a little bit of how when Department of Interior and others are looking at the comparisons, they really ought to be a lot more favorable to what's happening in the Lower Basin.
Couple of minutes. I have a couple more political questions I want to get to, including a good one from Clark, who's joining us. But Terry, I don't know if you can answer this one. What about all the groundwater big mines we're using and will use? Copper World south of Tucson is growing. Many around that area are worried about the amount of water they will use.
You said specifically mines?
Yes, specifically mines. Yes.
Mines are a water user, certainly. They are, I know, similar to the Intel story, they work very hard on reuse. They're also, for instance, the largest new copper mine is in an AMA. It's in a water management area. And so they have to recharge everything that they take out. And I think that's something we should never forget. In Arizona, we've set a national standard for responsible use of groundwater. And what the legislature passed in 1980 was history making, rightfully so. And it actually means that we will have zero withdrawals within the AMAs. And the mines have to live by that if they're in an AMA. Some are not, and therefore we have to depend upon their reuse programs. And sometimes that's a very, very tough persuasion. But I know that the biggest one under contemplation today is in an AMA, and we'll have to recharge.
And they have been working on all of the planning that's going to be involved with that, and thus far have been, I think, good stewards of that responsibility. And I fully expect that they will be moving forward.
That's good for folks to hear, especially when there was even this is not a related question to that, but Intel isn't the only chip manufacturer in town. This is from Dana. What restrictions have TSMC and onsemi and Microchip Technology and Amkor agreed to? I imagine, Terry, to some extent, if you're going to do business in Arizona, you have to, as we've talked about, maybe you can't be quite Intel, which has been an established company for decades, as we've mentioned with Kelly. Is there something that goes into some of these things to make sure that, there are certain agreements or certain requirements for all of these companies to come here, that water use might face restrictions, probably will face restrictions?
Absolutely. And the rules that applied to TSMC are very different from the ones that applied to Intel 20 years ago. Today, if you're going to be a major employer, you're going to be a major manufacturer in Arizona, you have to have an identified water source. The same is true under the groundwater management code of anybody who wants to build a new subdivision. You need to have an identified source. And that's something that didn't exist before. We had some benefits from Colorado River water that came early on in excess of our needs. Now it barely meets our needs, and with these cuts, it will be substantially below what we're used to getting. So it's more than belt tightening. It's a major change in how we approach new industry, new housing developments. But please, when you're telling this story, say, yeah, this is serious, but we also are the national leaders here in Arizona for using water responsibly.
It's actually quite, to build on Terry's point, it's actually quite commendable that you look at the situation. We are growing with these industries that are critical, not just for Arizona and for our jobs and so forth, but industries that are critical to the entire country's economic strength, national security. We're now a global hub for that underway. And they're doing it all within the parameters that will serve Arizona best with regard to water, right? They're working with this from the very again, intentional from the beginning, and knowing that these things have to be dealt with. And I think that's commendable for all of the parties, the jurisdictions that are uh, acquiring these huge operations within their borders, and it's commendable for the industries and leaders of those industries who recognize if you're coming to Arizona, this is what it's going to take, and it's worth it.
It's worth it, absolutely. And Neil will probably have the numbers. I don't have them right on the top of my head, but we're using less water in central Arizona today with something like five than we did in the late 1950s.
Right.
And I believe the population is approximately 5 times what it was then.
Yes.
So we have been able to grow with less water. And that's a story that we need to get out. But let's not increase the problem by having confiscatory or very serious hammering from the federal government. They can do a much better job in supporting those industries than they have shown their willingness to do so far. So please get the word out to Congress, to the Interior Department, to the administration that Arizona is critical for our country.
We're using less water than we did in 1956. And I always remember that year because it's the year that I was born. So I know I always get that one
right. Kelly, I'm sorry to leave you out of this one, but I'm gonna go to Terry and Neil on this one to sound like someone who's lived here most of my life, which I have, and Terry and Neil somewhat similar. What about education from the standpoint that we saw in Maricopa County? We talk about how much population. Maricopa County was the fastest growing county in the country for a long time. Not sure if that's still the case, but we didn't have these same restrictions that we're going to be facing and that we've already started to face. How do you maintain the quality of life? I mean, I don't want to be pie in the sky here, but how do we maintain the quality of life and a growing population, which we all want to see? But when there are some people who came here thinking, wow, I'm going to turn this into my suburb of Chicago. I'm going to have my green lawn. I'm going to really, and because I grew up in a neighborhood like that, I loved it. But now as we see things change, what are the challenges to keeping the quality of life people want here and also people wanting to live here year round with some of these water restrictions? How do we educate people enough to say this place is worth staying? It's a great place to be, even if you have to use less water for a while.
Well, my wife keeps telling me to reduce the size of our lawn, and we have. If you look at the metropolitan area of Phoenix, the amount of turf, what they call ornamental turf, in the last 20 years has gone down by, I believe, 80%. People are getting the idea. There have been major changes. The quality of life does not necessarily depend on abundant water. I get in trouble every time I go to Fountain Hills, but we've got to stop putting fountains in the air that where the water doesn't come back down, it evaporates. And that's a message that come out. You haven't seen any more developments with lakes. You don't see many more new golf courses, frankly, and the ones that are there are becoming very frugal about how they use water. So there are big changes already happening in Arizona, and the quality of life, I would argue, has not gotten a bit worse. In fact, I think many ways living in a desert is a luxury. It's a privilege, and we get a few beautiful spring days. We've just had them, I'm afraid. But we get a absolutely wonderful climate, with the exception of June, July, and August, and we have a lot to be proud of without having to have an artificial lake, without having to have an infinite amount of turf. Those doing that. And if you look to Southern Arizona, they've been going and prospering with less than 90 gallons per person per day for the last 20 years. So hooray for Tucson.
I'll throw in real quickly Our tourism and our golf course industry in Arizona is extremely important, a huge part of our economy, and they have done their share as well by reducing the amount of water for golf courses, using more effluent for golf courses. The hospitality industry, the large hotels and so forth, have water conservation programs and so forth. So, as an industry, if you look at all the big industries for Arizona, I don't see any one of them that is not doing their part, that is not stepping up, that is saying, okay, you all fix this, but we're going along the way we went along. Everybody is participating in these conversations, and it's great to see, and it's important.
Kelly, if you're comfortable, I'd love to have you jump in on that too. Just the idea of, perception of living in a place like this and how Intel has managed and continues to manage that going forward, to even be, as we said, kind of a good example for other businesses coming here.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I think Intel strives to be a good neighbor. We've managed to present our properties in an appealing way, an attractive way, without use of turf, right? We have xeriscaping, landscaping. We're leading by example in that. Using reclaimed water for irrigation, enabling some of that for the community. I think some of the things that the city of Chandler has done with, the Veterans Oasis Park, which is a recharge basin, but can also be used as a beautiful park for people to go enjoy wildlife and, walks around and enjoy that park lifestyle. I think there's certainly room for infrastructure that is used for recharging the aquifer, that kind of thing, to also be a place where the community can go enjoy time with the family and enjoy an outing and, have that kind of lifestyle that we all look forward to doing those kind of things.
Neil and Terry, you guys ready to talk politics for a few minutes?
Oh,
Well, so I've probably
If
said
you
this before.
insist.
Yes. So Terry, your father was not in this photo, but I have this old photo of Barry Goldwater, Carl Hayden, Mo Udall, Paul Fannin. I think all these guys were in this photo. So for people who don't know Arizona history, these are all famous politicians of the day who were from different political parties, but they all cared about Arizona. And there was this history of bipartisan and nonpartisan cooperation on protecting the water supply. As it relates to going forward with some of the things we've discussed today, I'd love that both of you guys chime in, whoever wants to go first. Are we all sort of rowing in the same direction? Even if people have certain disagreements in political aspects, not only realizing that Arizona has this need for water and in some cases conservation, reduction, are people moving in the same direction as far as realizing, not necessarily because we're fighting other states, though that could be part of it. How are we doing that, Neil, so far at this point, as far as our leaders, elected and otherwise?
yeah. My observation is we're doing well in that regard. The people on a local level, working with people on a regional or state level, everyone realizes the importance of this issue, and as best as I can see, avoids the partisanship. I used water this morning. I couldn't tell if it was Republican or Democrat or Independent, and most people don't, and they don't care. They want elected officials to work on the issues that are important. This is clearly one of those. And so whether it's a mayor and council that's looking at approving developments and having to set water rates and a long line of people under public appearances to talk about it, or making infrastructure investments and then having all of us who are citizens participate in those infrastructure investments, all of that stuff has to happen. And it seems jurisdiction to jurisdiction, cross jurisdictions, it appears to me that it is happening with, I think, even a little more intention than it did when I served 20 to 30 years ago. But what do you think, Terry?
Well, I think it's one of our great legacies here in Arizona that we've had no party identification on water. And hopefully that's something that will continue into the future. My poster on my wall, and there's probably not many other people, is a picture of Morris K. Udall and John Rhodes. These were respective leaders in the House of Representatives who basically put together the Central Arizona Project legislation. Obviously, Carl Hayden played a big role in that. So did Stuart Udall, who was Secretary of Interior. But those two giants in the House of Representatives, one Republican, one Democrat, Rhodes, in fact, was the minority leader in the House of Representatives at the time in 1968 when the CAP was passed, were A, they were incredible public servants, both of them. B, they were incredibly smart. And last, they cared about water and they knew it was critical for Arizona's future. So they went to work, bipartisan in Washington, got the job done. If there's any bone I have to pick with our current local elected officials, it's they haven't been looking ahead as much as I wish they would. These all water projects take time. As Neil said, they take money. That groundwork has not been very well laid right now, and we're paying a price for it. But it still could be. I mean, we still can come together as a state, do the water management that we have to do, make sure that we're able to share the water throughout the state at a time of crisis. As Mo Udall said once in his humorous way, Arizona has water. It's just in the wrong places and it comes at the wrong times. So let's be more creative about how we soften that situation, because I can assure you there's going to be less water in the future. We as Arizonans, I believe, have the capacity to deal with that.
And last question before we go to final statements or takeaways, guys. I want to go to Clark. I think this plays off what we just talked about. And Terry and Neil, this is directed to you guys as former electeds. How do we support our elected officials and prepare the public for the increased investments that will need to be made to bring in the additional water resources required for people who live here today and those who may choose to live here in the future? I think that comes off of what you were just saying, Terry. But Neil, can I have you chime in on that?
Well, yeah, as much as some folks like to make it otherwise, data and facts are neutral. And so I encourage all of our leaders to lean on, I'll use the flow of data, right? Lean on the flow of data that is presented to make your arguments and make your case and work cross-jurisdictionally, Tempe to Scottsdale to Phoenix, this region to the rest of Arizona, and build those relationships and share your flow of data and what it means to your residents, what it means to your community, respecting that it may mean something different to others. That's why we're all from different parts of the state, and ignore the short-term noise. If the business community can help our elected officials ignore sort of the political noise and just work on your long-term obligation, that I think I think we'd be helping if we can do that.
Amen. And every elected official in Arizona is running for re-election right now, or they're running for the first time. There are debates, there are forums, there are public exhibitions where they have to come to the voters. Please ask them, don't miss the opportunity to say, what are your plans? What do you believe the state should be doing in terms of our long-term water supply? You should go to protectingarizona's Lifeline.com, please. You'll get all the data that Neil just referred to and more. But that question, I think, has to be asked over and over and over again. They need to hear it from everybody that this is something we care about as Arizonans. They need to care about it as public officials. And as Neil just said, they need to take the long view because this is a problem for the ages. It probably is not going to turn around quickly. We don't know what kind of snow we're going to get in the Rockies in the future, but I think we can be pretty sure that it'll be less than we've had in the past.
And as we wrap up, I want to give each of you probably less than a minute to sort of a takeaway based on the conversation. Kelly, let me start with you. Is there, even just to reiterate what you said earlier, and people may have missed it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's really, Intel's been in Arizona for 45 years. We don't plan on going anywhere. Water is essential to our operations, and drastic cuts to the Colorado River could have significant impacts to our industry across Arizona. Since 1996, we've grown our 700-acre Ocotillo campus to 6 fabs, running the latest cutting edge 18 angstrom technology. And we've been doing all of that while reducing our freshwater with demand and restoring water to be net positive for water. It really is vital that industry takes this responsibility and that we're good stewards of water. I briefly spoke about our Alliance for Water Stewardship certification. We were the first semiconductor company in the US to achieve any level of certification in that, and only the second company in the US to achieve the platinum level certification that we got. So, I think Intel has done a good job of showing that we're not just sitting on the sidelines watching what's going to happen. We're actually getting in the game. So we encourage others to do that as well.
Thanks, Kelly. How about Neil?
Here's my take on it. Will we work on all this? How will we will come up with the answers that we need. We will because we must. And we must because we cherish this state and we cherish it as our home. We cherish it as the place where that we are good stewards, being desert dwellers. So we will because we must. And I'm optimistic that people will come together and will solve these things. And long after we're all gone, there'll be people still talking about water in the desert. But that'll be because the foundations that were laid before us, the foundations we will lay, will continue on.
Thank you. Terry, you get the last word.
Well, my message is I'd like to be in this discussion and going forward, Paul Revere, not Chicken Little. The sky is not falling, but there's, and I can't even use a storm analogy, but there is trouble ahead. We need to understand it, number one. We need to take whatever action we as individuals or as businesses can do to conserve and also to lobby, to legislate, and make sure that we know we've got a rich future. It's going to be different, as Neil said. It's going to be one that is water restricted far more than the past, but it doesn't mean that our quality of life is going to be, it's going to be different, but it's not going to, it's going to rise to the occasion, in my opinion. Arizona's done an amazing job. We thought we'd amount to anything. And obviously, we're now one of the most dynamic areas of the message must be that we can do this. It's going to be really hard, but I believe our leadership and our creative juices will prevail. So we need to rally, as Paul Revere did, not panic.
Okay. Thank you to all of you. Terry Goddard, obviously president of the Central Arizona Water Conservation District Board. Neil Giuliano, president and CEO of Greater Phoenix Leadership. Kelly Osborne, senior technologist at Intel with a focus on water. Thank you very much. We apologize for the technical difficulties that prevented Todd Sanders, president and CEO of the Greater Phoenix Chamber, from joining us today. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday morning with us and learning more about water and the Coalition for Protecting Arizona's Lifeline. This has been the latest morning scoop from the Arizona Capital Times. I'm Steve Goldstein. Enjoy the rest of your day.